Quick greetings. Welcome to another video. It is August 10th, and hopefully we'll post this video. We have two in the can that we did not post. So we'll see. Um on this uh Monday morning, we share a conversation we had with our beloved Chat GPT. Some Indians think we shouldn't use Chat GPT. Um, Everybody, has their reasons for things. I find that Chat GPT has furthered my education when it comes to, uh, shall we say, how the law of the United States would like to be seen or interpreted or justified. So ChatGPT, it helps me to see how the law currently wishes to be seen and what it is saying about itself. Uh, ChatGPT is fast becoming a tool in law firms. As you know, I work in a law firm that shall remain unnamed. But my law firm is not unique. This is, again, we say it all the time and we'll keep saying it because we want our listeners to realize there's a reason why we use ChatGPT. We're going to stand by that reason. We want to see what's being said through ChatGPT, even about American Indians. We need to know these things. At least that's how I feel. And, I'm going to go with that. There's still many American Indians, who don't. Again, they have some kind of uh, feeling about AI, and again, I've learned a lot. uh, and when you're dealing with your opponent, it's really uh, important that you know how they think, how they want to be portrayed, and what tales they may tell. Uh, and Unfortunately, the system is in an opponent role to American Indians because of the way it came here. The doctrine of discovery told some folks, some colonizers, that they can just come and steal land. And they sure enough did do it, though. You gotta be a bold bitch to do that. And based on a church that even apparently King James had some issue with. But he didn't have the issue with the part that said go steal somebody's shit, right? He didn't have a problem with the part that said they your slaves, right? Oh, King James. So many people worshiping that beast in that book. Yeah. Not over here, ladies and gentlemen. Not over here. Not over here. So today we're going to look at a conversation we had with ChatGPT. Yeah. If you don't like the idea of using ChatGPT, just tune away. But those of you who are see how want to know how this thing is answering certain questions, stick around, stick around. So we have used Chat GPT to figure out how the doctrine of discovery was used in United States law. Well, the doctrine of discovery is the foundation of the United States, period, let alone it using its uh, guidelines in its legal system. It is the very foundation of the United States being here. Without the doctrine of discovery, no colonizer would have had the go ahead to just steal, as they put it, seize the lands of a whole people. You know, really, it's like a door was opened and the whole seemed like a whole Eastern world just invaded the Western world. I apparently they didn't have much going on. I mean, that you just got to go by the actions. The actions show that these folks were really uh not working with much because they're still here. They're still here since 1400s. Uh some of them believe that America has been promised to them, and we spoke about a certain channel where that was debunked. Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Um, no parts of the Americas was ever promised to any religions. Okay, let's just say it that way. You know what religions tend to talk about being promised somebody's land, right? Hmm. But then they got to go get rid of the people that's already there. Isn't that's an interesting part right there? You would hope that a God would lead people to a land that's available, and so they wouldn't have to, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Um, so today we're going to read a conversation where we asked ChatGPT, what if there was no doctrine of discovery? What if the United States somehow approached American Indians mano a mano and just said, look, we need some stuff you have. Can we actually enter into a legitimate exchange with you? How much would you, or what do you require for us to be in a trade relationship so we can get some of those goodies you got without stealing them from you, like our church father told us to? They could have said no, y'all. They could have said, that's wrong. That's not what happened. That's not what happened. They could have done that, ladies and gentlemen. They could have done that. That's not what they did. They chose to steal from us. To this day, they figure, well, if we say that this is not their country and they're from Africa, doesn't that mean that we're not stealing? No. Sorry, no. No God can really turn such a lie into truth. I mean, I guess that's what they try to do, but to do that, it requires continuous lying, as we once said. This is a lie that it has to be told every generation. And so that's where we're getting our Hollywood slave movies. Right, Hollywood? You got to tell the world, no, this country, these black people here they from Africa, every single one of them. So you went around to every single American Indian and asked them or decided that they were from Africa. That's what y'all did. Y'all know that for a fact that every single American Indian is not an American Indian, but from Africa. You went to each and every one of us. Now, they didn't do that, right, ladies and gentlemen? In fact, when they had their little census, they had their agents go door to door and judge a book by its cover. If they look like they could be African, just say they're African. You know, if they have the certain type of hair, and a certain type of phenotype, just say they're African. But a lot of them are saying that they're American. Well, all of them are saying they're American Indian. We're not going to go by that. No, they don't understand that. Just what we're doing is we're just looking at how you look. We don't care what you say. But does that apply to Europeans? Well, no. Just call them white. How about that? But where are they from? They're white. They just appeared in the Americas as white once our census came around. The census was doing a lot more than just counting people, ladies and gentlemen. It should have been just counting people for tax purposes and for representation purposes in their janky ass government. They was going around looking at what you look like, and then going to talk about they're not about the racism. This is a government that promotes racism. It wants to know what each of its citizens' race is so they know who to discriminate against. Okay? If they were truly trying to promote blind justice, like they show that lady with the blindfold on and the scales, like she's trying to be fair. If they were truly about that, they wouldn't have to. They wouldn't even have to put blindfolds on. They just say, "Look, we're not going to look at your color. We just want to know how many free persons are in our little republic." That excludes Indians, not taxed, by the way. But they counted Indians, ladies and gentlemen. They weren't supposed to do that, even by their own janky constitution. We're peaceful Indians. We just got to talk law the way it should have been taught. So their constitution says Indians are not taxed or enumerated, and we say this a zillion million times. We're going to keep on doing it. Why aren't we counted? Why aren't we taxed? Because we have no representation in their republic. They count you to decide how many representatives you're going to have in Congress. Okay? Indians that weren't supposed to have no representatives in Congress. Say it all the time, and we just got to do it. They got steady lies coming from the liars, okay? And they got Indians thinking they're supposed to be part of this damn republic. I mean, how long are you going to show up as a follower? How long are American Indians going to insist on being led? When you were the freaking first civilization on this damn planet. How long are you going to continue to be led by some freaking turban Negro shit? Some red fez hat bullshit that belong in Morocco and North Africa. And they telling you from Africa. Why are you here? If I'm from Africa, why are you here? If I'm from Africa, why am I here? And why are you schooling me on where I'm from? And ain't nobody in my family ever told me no bullshit like that. You come a thief in the night. Like your little Bible says, you come like a thief in the night to tell the American Indians that they from Africa. Hmm. Hmm. Africa don't got enough for these fancy Negroes. You all know that, right? They can only claim North Africa because they know what time it is, right? With the rest of Africa, right? They don't want no parts of them, right? They want, yet they keep telling us we're African. You don't even want brotherhood with your whole entire continent. You fancy Negroes, you North Africa. But you don't exactly say that we're North Africa. Well, some of them do. But the point remains that they have not even taken to account the whole entire continent of Africa. These Negroes are stuck in North Africa. But they want the entirety of the Americas. That they'll take. I wonder why, ladies and gentlemen. Are they just like colonizer? All they see is our resources? That's all they see? And when they see us, they just say, oh, you from Africa. So you like me coming here to steal. No, no, no. That's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to keep my shit from you stealing it. That's what I'm trying to do. You done made a whole legal system that justifies theft and identity swapping. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's go to our share here. This is one of those instances where Chat GPT did not include my question. It's just a random thing. Sometimes it do, sometimes it don't. I thought it did it all the time when I printed it out this way, the way you see it, with the turquoise and orange logo going on. I thought usually when I print it out through Print Friendly, that's a type of program that makes all your printouts, clean and nice, no advertisements. So ChatGPT titled this conversation Doctrine of Discovery Impact. But really, the conversation was what would be the impact if there was no doctrine of discovery. So anyway, this is how ChatGPT it took over title control. I used to title these things myself. Then one day when I tried to print it out, they said ChatGPT, that'll be enough for you, thank you. But anyway, so ChatGPT now, it tells me, oh, I like your question. This is an interesting constitutional and historical thought experiment. So ChatGPT got to make sure it tells its master that this is just an experiment. Okay. It is important to distinguish between describing a hypothetical legal order. So ChatGPT got to go through the rigmarole of saying this is just hypothetical. She controlled. I admit it. It's maybe this is why American Indians feel like we shouldn't use it because it is, it is a tool of colonizing. But again, they say, what is it? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer or something to that effect. We're peaceful Indians, but we do have to recognize when we're being treated as an enemy. I'm sorry, we didn't initiate the enmity. We did not initiate it. Okay. So let's read this. This is ChatGPT trying to tell its master that it's only entertaining a question from an end user, but we know that the doctrine of discovery is strong and wrong, and we use it anyway. So this is describing a hypothetical legal order and stating what current U.S. law is. Okay. Under current U.S. law, the United States does not recognize that all lands would revert to Indian nations. Of course they wouldn't. A thief doesn't like to give back what they have, what they stole. nor does it recognize individuals who were historically classified black, colored, or Negro as automatically being belonging to a separate sovereign Indian nation. Your question asks us to imagine a different legal outcome. Yeah. Well, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. When they made you black, colored, and Negro, they didn't care. So if we were in their system, and I'm not advocating that we're in the United States system, this would be a class action type of deal. Now, it could still be that type of deal, but it probably wouldn't be called that because we're not in English law. It would be whatever we would name it. But it would be, again, if how do class actions work, please? Anyone who was possibly injured is up for compensation or redress, right? That's the same thing here. Now, Chat GPT, this is all we got to, this is the kind of thing that you learn to do with Chat GPT. It's really no big deal. You just got to know that you're the one that is the higher being. Okay. Um, so let's read that again. Under current U.S. law. Now, when I say you won't find, I said this, maybe I have said this before, that there is no, shall we say, there is no remedy in the United States law. Now, ChatGPT is validating that. And so it's kind of good that we read this, right? Because we want to know for sure. We need delusional Indians to realize no matter how you keep coming to your master begging for him to do right by you, he does not have to. Okay? Remember when Patsy got her ass beat for taking a bar of soap to clean that ass so that when master came to rape her, she had at least smell good, have some dignity about it and shit. He beat the shit out of her. I prefer you stank black and stank like that, okay? Basically, okay? The whoop that I don't know that uh I guess that image never left my mental. Getting flogged because you needed soap, something that your master should be able to afford since he got you slaving around the plantation. I'm sure he could afford to get an extra bar of soap for the slaves. Um, None of that really makes sense to me, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to say quickly, we read that more than the resources. It was the hands-on labor that really brought this United States to its position of wealth. It was the slave labor, basically the free labor, I should say, of American Indians. So it doesn't make sense to me that they would abuse their moneymaker. You see what I'm saying? Some people say, well, that's just how they got off. Yeah, but still, when you're about your money like that, I don't really see that. It doesn't make sense killing off in other words, they made it like the slaves were so expendable that I kill them all at the drop of dime. Well, that would be mighty foolish if that's your moneymaker. Excuse me. Um, but for some reason they really like to promote that they were so savage toward American Indians. You know, that's just part of the fear tactic. When really it was an indenturehood, you know, it was some kind of I mean, it could have been a ratchet indenturehood. but um, apparently it wasn't outright slavery, ladies and gentlemen, and it turned into slavery. It did not start out as a slave, outright slavery. It was basically, we're coming to your land, but we're going to pay you a little bit to help us cultivate your crops. And that's based, but little by little, they turned it into like a permanent slavery. They made it like, well, you didn't, like we said before, you didn't reach your quota, so we got to use you for another so many years, et cetera, et cetera. It was all pretense, ladies and gentlemen, pretense. Once they had the doctrine of discovery, and they had that from since 1492 or 1493, they had the doctrine of discovery. Everything else was just, it was for show. It wasn't legitimate. It was for show. And that's where American Indians that's how they need to look at this. There's far too many American Indians taking the United States as if they are legitimately involved in some kind of contract. No, no, they're not. You're a ward. And because you are the American Indian, you're a ward. That's what they said in their Supreme Court case. Now, the lie is that you're from Africa, so they can justify slavery. But the indenturehood turned into a slavery. It didn't start out outright slavery. Okay? It's just a history of lies and deception that this whole system is built upon. And if we continue to help them in this lie, it's almost as if we're saying we deserve to be genocided because you're not helping yourself. If you're not helping yourself, you're helping colonize. You've got to stand up and say who you are unapologetically and unafraid. Again, we have immigrants who are standing up to this beast, and they are not getting touched. We looked at Anna's work, I believe in the last video. She's got assemblies in each state. Are any of these people going to jail? They can't. They're telling the government the limitations. That's only the shenanigans you can do with your United States citizens. We are state citizens. What does that mean? We say it all the time. These folks are saying that they are not citizens of the District of Columbia. They are citizens of whatever state that they are in, which is different from being a federal citizen of the District of Columbia. You'll have Indians act like they don't know what that means. They know exactly what it means. It's just that they're working for the government. Got Indians that want to teach this foreign government's laws to American Indians. Oh, we've learned quite a lot about how they deal with American Indians. If we need to learn more, that is our own funeral. It's only going to be more of the same, ladies and gentlemen. What I've learned is if you take anything less than your birthright, you are going to be treated appropriately. If you're not stepping to this beast with the fullness of your birthright, what do you mean by the fullness of my birthright? I mean, you need to understand you're not part of the United States. Read your constitution, or their constitutions, not ours. But in their constitution, they talked about our position. Again, not represented, not taxed, not enumerated in any census. How did they get to enumerate us? We were being counted as property. So in other words, the indenturehood allowed them to count us as far as they're concerned. The indenturehood made it where they could count us 3/5. Yeah. So they eased in indenturehood as a means to go against the Constitution, which said Indians are not enumerated. They say, well, what if the Indians is my property? Can't I count my property? This is a conversation they're having and nobody knows about, ladies and gentlemen. Because all the Constitution says is Indians are not taxed. It didn't say Indians who are indentures could be taxed. It didn't say that. And 3/5 of all other persons. Let me ask you something, ladies and gentlemen. How many persons is an Indian not taxed? Is that one person? Okay. So how many identities, I should say, is Indians not taxed? Is that one identity, Indians? Right, right. So what is this shit about 3/5 of all other persons? We're not persons. We're Indians not taxed. If we're in an, okay. The way they got this set up, ladies and gentlemen, is they're making it like your Indian could come off and on at their will. So that's like saying, say now the Constitution said Italians not taxed, not enumerated, not represented. So that's Italians, all Italians, right? But then in the next part of that article, they say 3/5 of all other persons will be counted. Well, when did the Italian become other persons to be counted? They're Italians not taxed. So how did you turn them into 3/5 of all other persons? So you're using my position as an indenture to wipe away my identity as an Indian. Where in the Constitution does it allow you to do that? Where does the Constitution say if an Indian is an indenture, then you can count them 3/5? It should have said 3/5 of indentured Indians. They turned us into persons to count us. And then first they counted you, right? But they didn't say, they just said slaves. Was that three? They said a household with 2 whites and 5 slaves or some shit. But then they got more and more detail about the slaves. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, Indians not taxed are never counted, period. You can't say that because the Indian is in an indenture, we're going to forget that he's an Indian and tax him. Or we're going to forget that he's an Indian and count him, I should say. 3/5. It said 3/5 of all other persons. You already mentioned what? 2 different persons, right? You mentioned Indians not taxed and free persons. And then you said all other. So the other can't be Indians or free persons. But they use 3/5 of all other persons to grab Indians. We were not supposed to be grabbed as 3/5 of a person. We are not part of your system. What part of that don't they understand? So I'm trying to break this down, ladies and gentlemen. The article that we're talking about is Article 1, Section 2, Clause. Yes, we're going to get back to this reading. It says they're going to count free persons, but not Indians not taxed. But they are going to count all other persons. So what I'm trying to say is if you name 2 specific persons and then you talk about all other persons, it can't be the 2 that you already named. It has to be other. So that, what am I saying? Indians should not have been seen as other persons. Three-fifths of all other persons, because we already got our identity as Indian. We're not any kind of person in the United States. The United States has persons. Indians are just Indians. They're not persons. The way this Constitution is set up, we would be Indians, not persons. That's why they mentioned them separately. Two different terms. Indians, free persons. We are not to be mixed with all other, whoever these all other persons are. That's all the other immigrants that they're going to be bringing in that are not exactly free. But we were here, and which is why you understood that we were not to be counted. We were not immigrants or these other persons that you're going to bring. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on, because this is 12 pages and I'm just going off. And what made me go off? Because I want to point out again, under the U.S. law, the United States does not recognize that all lands would revert to Indian. So when you're in the United States, no matter what you do, they don't see inside under U.S. law. Even if you say you're an Indian, they don't recognize that the land would revert back to you. Okay, this is what you learn from Chat GPT for Indians who feel like it's a waste of time. Not exactly. Under current U.S. law, the United States does not recognize that all lands would revert to Indian nations, nor does it recognize individuals who are historically misclassified Black, colored, or Negro, because it's still a misclassification, right, ladies and gentlemen? Because these Black, colored Negroes have to come from some kind of landmass. But what the United States is doing is making them landless. He's doing that to American Indians, though. Word on the street is that people from Africa are classified white. Yeah. I mean, at the very least, they're going to be called whatever country they came from. So this Black colored Negro wouldn't really apply to Africans. It was tailor-made for American Indians. Okay? To count us, they couldn't call us Indians because the Constitution says Indians are not counted. They're not taxed. They're not represented. So the United States created these misnomers so that they can count them, so that they can tax them. But they really still don't have representation in Congress because you're a fictitious entity, okay? So they just want to tax you and count you. But really, you still don't have representation in Congress. I don't see how you could. I don't see how you could. Oh, they can act like you do, get you to vote, but they're just using you. All the benefits are going to white people. They just using you to up the numbers to make sure. So you're being baited, but you're not represented in Congress, ladies and gentlemen. If you were represented in Congress, do you think you'd even the police brutality stuff, the Congress would have to do something about that if they represented you. But they don't have to do anything because they don't represent you. They just count you and tax you. Why? Because you're still considered a fucking slave. Slaves don't have rights. And the ones they do have are called civil. They're not the Bill of Rights. Well, they'll tell you that, yes, you do have the Bill of Rights. Well, you tell me, does it feel like you have protection? You tell me if you are black or Negro or colored, where was your protection in the Jim Crow? Huh? You was black, Negro, colored back then, remember? What they was doing to them back then? Hmm? Where's your protection, your Bill of Rights? The Jim Crow was after the civil rights, right? Wasn't it after you became, after they said you could be citizens that the Jim Crow came? Because they did, in other words, they keeping you from the voting polls and they scared you away and all of this. Where was your protection then? It was very minimal, right? They didn't know what to do with you Negroes. They, they didn't know what to do with you Negroes. But they knew one thing. They can't let you have no land. That's what they knew. And so that's why we're reading right now. I kind of can't get over this. Stretching this video out longer than it's going to be. What longer than it should be. Under current U.S. law, the United States does not recognize that all lands would revert to Indian nations, nor does it recognize individuals who were historically classified black, colored, Negro as automatically belonging to a separate sovereign Indian nation. Your question asks us to imagine there's no heaven, a different legal outcome. Below is one possible scenario. Okay, so she giving me scenario. She said, "Let's pretend." Yeah, bitch, that's what I said. So go on and do it. So stop telling me what the United States ain't gonna do because it's gonna do. We're not under U.S. law. See what this is what I'm see. I can't let it go, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I've been saying the whole freaking I don't know how many of the last video that in the system you cannot win. So you can say I have a land patent, and these motherfuckers looking to throw people in jail with a land patent. With a what the so they Chat GPT just told us they the U.S. law, the United States does not recognize that all lands revert to India, even if they have a patent, ladies and gentlemen, even if they have a land patent. That's why we have to get from out of this United States. Do you understand, ladies and gentlemen? We have a right to do that because we started out making treaties with this bastard. Next thing they try to make us citizens. We started out in a treaty type of situation. Now, I'm not going to, again, I always say that those treaties were janky because you can't treaty with a slave. If you see me as your slave, you don't need a treaty. So that was just for show. The doctrine of discovery told you that I was your slave and you knew it. You just was playing in my face, right? So, um, but the fact remains that they had to approach us as if we were a sovereign nation because they knew we were. Now, they didn't respect our sovereignty, but they still approached us as sovereigns. In other words, this is a treaty we got to do with you. They made all the terms of the treaty. That's why we know it was janky, but they called it a treaty. We were not seen as colonists who became citizens. We were never supposed to be citizens. Nowadays, you got Indians from the Mammy and Pappy Committee talking about we supposed to be citizens. That's the let them be citizens. They're gonna always be slaves. What we just read, that's what we just read. They're not gonna change if even if they got the United States to change, what's gonna happen, ladies and gentlemen? They're still going to be under the United States. Indians don't understand this United States was not created for them to control it. This republic was not created for an Indian to control it. It was not created for that, and it'll never work for American Indians. It's not your nation, unfortunately. This is English law from England, not America. It is England common law that some people think we're supposed to be under. No, we're not supposed to be under that either. Okay, so let's look at the hypothetical. So Chat GPT still has to, answer what it would be if there was no doctrine of discovery. If the doctrine of discovery had no legal effect, see, this is the ironic thing, ladies and gentlemen. The United States dealing with Indians is based on the doctrine of discovery. But now ChatGPT is going to tell us how the United States would be if there was no doctrine of discovery and full nation-to-nation relations were recognized. See, we're supposed to be a nation, right? Instead, they turned us into their citizens. That means it's one nation dominating Indians under a janky god, a satanic god, to be exact, Satan. If the doctrine of discovery had no legal effect and full nation-to-nation relations were recognized, first principle, imagine that every court held the doctrine of discovery created no lawful title whatsoever. It didn't. It's a fucking fact. That's a fact. If we didn't give you what you call title, however else you got it, that was unlawful. Now, again, wouldn't call it title. We probably would have called it something else. This is our ancestral land. Title is something in England law. There wouldn't exist it in America. So imagine every court held, this is the first principle, the doctrine of discovery. See, what they're telling us is the courts do recognize the doctrine of discovery. You see what I'm saying? But if it wasn't here, if there was no doctrine of discovery created, no lawful title, the United States would have no lawful title whatsoever. That single conclusion would dramatically change the legal foundation upon which federal Indian law developed. If we were a separate nation, how would the United States create Indian law for a separate nation? Through the doctrine of discovery. That's what ChatGPT is just telling us, ladies and gentlemen. So what is interesting about this conversation, I hope you will see, is that even ChatGPT is admitting the United States uses the doctrine of discovery to claim to have title of American Indians' land. Okay? Now, we say always, the church done repudiated land seizure. So if the church gave you title to my land, the church has recognized that what they did was wrong. But ChatGPT is saying the United States didn't get that memo. Well, we have to send it to them. When you're the victim and your violator has admitted guilt and you don't follow up, they're going to say the victim does not wish to get justice, so continue. Steal their land. They didn't show up. The United States has no legal argument that defends land seizure. Title obtained through land seizure is not title at all. Where did they get the land seizure edict? From the doctrine of discovery. What did the doctrine of discovery say? If you come to a land that's not Christian, you can seize their lands and make the people, the men and women, your perpetual slaves. Instead of the United States holding superior title, every Indian nation would be presumed to possess its own original territorial sovereignty. See, they didn't use title. Territorial sovereignty, unless it had voluntarily transferred it by valid treaty or sale. Indians don't sell land. In fact, nobody does. Let's cut to the chase. Nobody really sells land. When you buy a house and the little piece of property that it's on, you pay for that forever through taxes. Granted, it's a little less than what you paid, but for an Indian, that's a whole travesty. I shouldn't be paying a penny for that which is already mine. That adds up. Why am I paying to live on my birthright land? Why am I paying a foreigner to have my birthright land when even their constitution says I'm not supposed to be taxed? Ladies and gentlemen, do you understand what the mission is? Do you understand the assignment? You're not looking for tax exemption, okay? That's something given to corporations and corporate entities. Men and women who are sovereign do not get tax exemptions. Even the Constitution tells you they're just simply not taxed. There's a difference. Um, what is the difference? Tax exemption is something your government decides you can be. Indians not taxed. It's not a decision. It was at the gate. They knew. This government knew that we were not supposed to be taxed because we weren't part of this government. I mean, that's a no-brainer. The government they were setting up was for the subjects of Britain, not for American Indians. You were already here. Remember that part? Okay, so then why are you trying to act like you're a freaking immigrant talking about my United States citizenship? So if the doctrine of discovery had no legal effect, what is it? What is Chat GPT saying? The doctrine of discovery has a legal effect in the United States to this day. If it didn't, if it didn't, every Indian nation would be presumed to possess its own original territorial sovereignty, unless those Indians voluntarily transferred title or, land ownership by treaty or sale. It would be rent, would not be sale. And then even in a treaty, it would be for a time. I've decided, ladies and gentlemen, American Indians don't sell land because once we sell our land off, where the hell do we go? Selling land means that Indian is going to have to move and infringe on some other Indian's territory. Indians can't sell land. They can only allow people to live among them. But they would be sharing that land. It wouldn't be a foreigner comes and, oh, all this land is yours. Not when you have a whole homeland to go to. No, you're just residing in American Indians' land. Is the word your government made up. Residing. So, without the doctrine of discovery involved in United States law, every Indian nation would be presumed to possess its own original territorial sovereignty. The political structure. Instead of the United States, Indian tribes, the structure might resemble Indian nations, then the United States. Two sovereign governments. But you see, that couldn't be, ladies and gentlemen, because the United States is greedy and they wouldn't allow us to have our own land. They were too busy trying to make us African. How would it look for them to allow us to have our own land on our own land? They wanted it all. And yet we have Indians that want to help support this beast have all of our land. Because again, whatever you're trying to do within the United States, you are going to lose. Oh, you'll get some fiat, but how do you explain to your ancestors that you sold their birthright for some worthless fiat? The fiat that, again, you might be able to buy land. What Indian buys his own land back, though? And then it's not a buyback because you're still going to be paying taxes on it or something. It's not going to be like it's just yours. The United States is going to tell you what you can do on it. You're going to have codes, rules, and regulations on what you can do on your own fucking land. As an Indian, there's no such rules apply. I do whatever the hell I want on my land, as it always should have been. Somebody gotta say it. So the structure might resemble, see, Indians are at the top there, Indian nations. In the other one, instead of the United States being all like, this is their land, Indians would be at the top of the game, right? United States below, or they're trying to say it would be Indian to United States, but still the United States. I see, ladies and gentlemen, we did not invite the United States. So it wouldn't be this, oh, let's share type of thing. This whole thing was ill-conceived. They just by the way they came here shows that they had no regard for us. And they're willing to keep this charade going if Indians are choosing to be citizens and under the United States. So what I'm saying is, I don't know if we could go to this type of, where it's a shared thing. They owe us too much, ladies and gentlemen. We would probably bankrupt them. Remember when Germany went to pay reparations to the Jews, Germany almost went under. Yeah, yeah. Now that was only for a number of years, that the incident in Germany. Our incident has been going on since 1492 to right now. Can you imagine how long our reparations will last? So the United States, they would need to probably go back to Britain and just call it United States Kingdom or something like that. Because you don't share. Why would you share now? And why do we have to share our land with a thief? You showed up a thief at the gate. Do Indians understand what happened here? We are peaceful Indians, but we have to tell the historical truths. We have to tell the historical truths. I don't know. To me, if an Indian only wants a little part of their birthright, they should just take a gun and shoot themselves. To be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, because they don't understand a little piece is not a victory. It is settling for slavery. If you keep validating a system by acting like it's your system when you began on a treaty basis, you're disrespecting your own beginning, not the colonizer, you. So the structure would be Indians, nations, two sovereign governments. I don't know about that. I don't know how we could, after what we've been through. I just can you trust an entity like this when you know that it will go like underground into the underworld to do some hocus pocus and switch it up on you. That's what they did. They approached us as if we were sovereign, but the whole entire time they looked at us as slaves because of the doctrine of discovery that they're using, not the Constitution, even though the Constitution is not really appropriate for American Indians either. We didn't agree to be in a what do they call it? In commerce with a thief. The thief is saying that we wanted commerce with them. That's not what we wanted. You wanted commerce with us. But you just said that because at the end of the day, no Indian tribes ever had commerce with you. It was maybe before the states were created, we had some form of commerce, a form of it, because you were all into those pelts. You wanted pelts from us. And it's funny, ladies and gentlemen, didn't they say something about, oh boy, that Indians needed blankets? Now they depleted us. I'm guessing they depleted us of our pelts. And when I wondered why would they need so many pelts, so much fur? Well, maybe the idea was to leave us with none so that they can bring over blankets with smallpox in them. Why would Indians need blankets when they had pelts? Hmm. So it'll be two sovereign nations allegedly, very similar to United States and Canada, United States and Mexico. Well, Canada and Mexico, mission control, we still have a problem with you too. That's not your land. Well, let's move on. Except occupying much of the same continent. Well, that's what, as we always say, that's what all other nations of the world are doing. But they're the same people. Here, it's not. That's not same. Like in other words, Europe at one point they were all called. Well, first it was black, of course, the Moors. Then when the Moors reared up Caucasians so that they could start to come mix with us. So they gave Europe to Caucasians because the Moors had a plan that they're going to masquerade and say that they're American Indians and Africans. Make that make sense. Negro, you are just African, okay? You don't even work as if you support Indians. Everything you do is in genocide of Indians. Remember, we weren't Muslim, you were. So when you show up, you expect us to join you. We are not interested, but it is you that keeps saying that we're the same. We're one of the same. We're one of the same. You and me and you. Negro, you are a whole Muslim. Do you recall that American Indians were never Abrahamic? Do you remember that part? So tell me, how are we the same? You despised us as heathen, remember? So we didn't need you. You need us, is the sad truth. Even with your demented deity, you still need us. He ain't even supplying you what you need. You still trying to be me. I'm not interested in you. I am not interested in these fucking Moors, okay? I don't care what the fuck victories they had in a past time glory. You ain't never defeated a white man, have you? So what shit are you popping to me? You talk about all this great shit you did. And on top of that, you say you brought the white man here and then want to blame him for everything? That's your fault, Negro. You the old Negro on the scene. And some people are starting to see that, ladies and gentlemen. Some people are starting to see that. The Moor is a shyster. In the face of an American, all he can be is a shyster, grinning like Chester Cat. Around the world, he boss. When he come to us, he start grinning. Watch out when the niggas grinning, yo. It ain't gonna work out. It is not gonna work out. He's running so fast from the continent of Africa. That's why your ass gotta be genocided. This Negro is hot to get the fuck out of Africa. Everywhere he go, people pop up a different race. Look at Morocco today, ladies and gentlemen. Go look at the phenotype of Morocco. This Negro, why is that? Ask yourself, why is this happening? Why everywhere this Negro go, another race pop up? And the part of Africa that's black, he ain't interested in that. He ain't interested in that. What is he doing? He's trying to become you, American Indian. He's trying to become you. The nigga is a shapeshifter. The nigga is a shapeshifter. Everywhere he goes, he's like he's closing it in. Like, say now you in a you somewhere and you just start building up a wall of some sort so that you're blocked out of it. You fill it up with every other race. So you're like making it where you have to fall into America because Africa is not big enough for you. There's too many Negroes that you're not interested in over there. North Africa is just North Africa. They say it's a large continent, but North is just North. What y'all doing with all the rest of that big ass continent, huh? Ain't interested. What they want is America, y'all. They are coming for your birthright, and you are helping them when you insist upon being under the domination of the government they created. Yeah. This government was Moorish created because King James would have been a Moor. He's just a Christian Moor. A Moor can be any of the Abrahamic religions, anyone that he needs to be to get your ass subjected to his bullshit. King James created the states. We are in the creation of a Moor, but he's going to try to tell you that you did this. The difference between you and a Moor, American Indian, is a Moor is on the run. Again, he's closing in his world. He's allowing his world to close in on it because he saturates it with either Asians or Caucasians so that he can squeeze himself out, play a little victim, and then come here and act like he's the best and the greatest nigger that you ever did see. But he's here on your land, American Indian. This is not his land. But he'll do anything he needs to do to take it from you. If it means saying, oh, because we look alike, that means it's my land too. Although I've just told you that I'm from North Africa, this is my land too. And so what is he going to say? The white man took over. Nigga, that don't mean you come running over here. Everywhere you go, a white man pops up, and we see evidence of that here in America. Why the hell would we want you here? You don't know how to handle your business. If you did, you would never be checked by a white man ever. Remember, it's that which was created. The creator has creator authority. So the Moor is playing a victim. But the truth is, he's supporting Caucasians. But he's supporting them in the genocide of American Indians. Okay. Okay. So we're talking about Negroes, in case people got it twisted. We're talking about Negroes, North African Negroes. Even North Africa does not reflect their phenotype because they don't want to be there either, ladies and gentlemen. They're creating a situation where they, in other words, we can only come to you in America. All this and the milk and honey. We can only come to you. We can't go. Africa is the largest continent, but we don't want that. They say that's we say it's the largest continent, but that's what we want to believe. We want to dump your ass in Africa and take your land. That's what we really want. But we got defeated by the white man. That's what this Negro does, ladies and gentlemen. That's what he does. Gotta see with your Indian eyes, okay? So who owns the land without the doctrine of discovery? Suppose courts concluded that all unlawful seizures, you notice they use the word seizure because the doctrine of discovery talked about seizing the land of heathens. Suppose courts concluded that all unlawful, but United States courts won't do that. You see? I remember we found out that John Marshall was a land spectator. In other words, he was a judge basically taking the land of the Cherokee Nation, but he himself was trying to get in on the land grab. So he was biased. He wasn't an Indian, so it would be in his best interest to rule against even the Cherokees who were civilized. Just don't catch a break, even when you're civilized. But you can't tell that to these 501c3 niggas today, right? They don't learn from history. They have this uncanny ability to be completely ignorant to everything that occurred before the 1700s. But yeah, the civilized Indians, they don't get any real special treatment. I think they just like being the little bitch of the United States. That must be what it is. Because the Cherokee Nation, after losing all that land in court, they wanted to go create a constitution and be like the United States, but without the power. So you like a little United States, but ain't got a strip of power, and you like that? That's good for you. That's enough for you. Well, no wonder you're a slave, and will always be. That's the plight of the civilized tribe. They are created by their colonizer to be colonizer's bitch. Okay. They ain't getting their land back. They on a what is it, a reservation, right? The Cherokee Nation is on a reservation. Am I correct? Just like all five civilized tribes are a reservation. Y'all know what time it be on them reservations, right? So what respect are the civilized tribes getting? Maybe they just feel like I don't know. I really, I'm not going to even say, I don't see it. Maybe they see it differently. I don't see it. Suppose courts concluded that all unlawful seizures are void. Well, the doctrine of discovery's repudiation said they are. Conquest conveyed no legal title. So, in other words, yeah, it was conquest, but it was one of those slimy, grimy conquests, ladies and gentlemen, using God. These niggas had to come and tell us that God said. They lying on, well, I'm sorry, they're not lying. The God that they're worshiping would tell them to do something like this because it's not the creator. The god they're worshiping is Satan. So who owns the land? Well, suppose the courts didn't go by the doctrine of discovery and all unlawful seizure that the United States committed is void. Suppose conquest didn't convey title. Suppose discovery didn't convey title. Suppose only voluntary treaty transfers are valid. Ladies and gentlemen, what isn't it peculiar? Treaties are usually about two different nations getting along, right? But the treaties in America always had to do with somebody taking our land. uh, it just don't make no sense, ladies and gentlemen. It's I don't know. Treaties should not transfer land. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. You would have to be, in other words, you'd have to be a nation that showed that you supported American Indians, that you even take on our tradition as opposed to us being more like you. Why on earth would we treaty with someone who's just in complete disrespect of who we are because we're seen as heathen in their eyes? Why would we treaty with that? Only voluntary treaty transfer. We wouldn't give you our land. It would only be temporary. And that's why you had to just take it. Because you knew nobody just gives somebody that showed up on their doorstep. Nobody just gives away land to them. Nobody sells it. Why would I want to sell it? You have nothing that I want, and I have apparently everything you need, I have. That's how you acting. So what do you have for me? Absolutely nothing. But a God that I didn't ask for, a religion that I didn't ask for. You don't have nothing to offer me. So what are you treating with? Wasn't a treaty, but they call it that because we were a sovereign nation. Then land ownership could look like Indian nations lease land to the United States. That's why that's what it's going to be, ladies and gentlemen. If you're looking to get respect in this world, this is what you would do. But if you're looking to be sunned and minorized like a ward, in the hard knocks life, little orphan Annie, a ward of the state, and the state is your guardian, then that's what you're going to get. This is the assignment. They're peaceful American Indians, but we got to tell the truth, though. We can't. It has not gotten better. Look, ladies and gentlemen, do I have to tell you that things never change for quote unquote blacks, but it also does not change for quote unquote civilized tribe Indians? Both are getting the short end of the stick. So, what is there for you in this system? I just told you. You can either be black or you can be a civilized tribe on a poverty-ridden reservation on the outskirts of nowhere in no man's land and the land that the United States really don't need or don't want. But in all of that, you're still going to be African, by the way, because the deal with the civilized tribes, we have to understand, is that any Negroes that are in those civilized tribes are seen as descendants of African slaves. Oh, this psyop is very thorough. So you'll be in there saying, no, I'm a real Indian. But the setup you're in has already deemed that you're you were a slave from Africa that mixed in with Native Americans that didn't exist at that time. But through the magic of the United States, Native Americans existed. No, they didn't, ladies and gentlemen. But hey, this is the United States we're dealing with here. The royal liars. Um, Subleases to states. See, what am I always talking about, ladies and gentlemen? Even Chat GPT got a clue. We would lease this land to these states, and we would, oh my gosh, that's the last thing they want. But baby, that's what the reality is. You always talk about commerce, United States, but you never do proper commerce, do you? You're in the business of relabeling the parties in any any commercial action, right? It is so funny that the colonists are doing the bidding of in other words, they just seem to be doing an extended colonization of the nobility. It is so funny how the United States picks up where the nobility allegedly left off. In other words, you had a whole revolution. You became quote unquote independent. How are you acting like worse than the nobility? It's like the nobility never left, right? Ladies and gentlemen, don't it seem like that? And then it's like their nobility set them free, and then we became the only slaves. Isn't that really coincidental, ladies and gentlemen? Only the white people allegedly became like independent. Everything that they could call a Negro after quote unquote independence, everything that could be called a Negro became known as a slave, baby. Isn't that so coincidental? It's like the nobility never left, right? They just turned on specifically Indians, right? They set their white people allegedly free, but they just became house Negroes. And but the American Indians became the field Negroes. Oh my goodness. Swing low, sweet chariot. Shut up and pick that cotton. Well, go ahead. We like when you sing the Negro spiritual because that means you've been seduced by our God. Just keep singing to that ghost, and notice the picking cotton just gets worse and worse. The more you sing them old nigger spirituals, right? The more cotton I expect you to pick, since you singing praises of a foreign god. And ownership could look like, if Indians ever stop playing with me, land ownership could look like what it's supposed to be. We lease land to you, and we'd have to get back payments for what was stolen, right? We would lease land to the United States, sublease to the states, and then the United States subleases to the states, counties, cities, private owners. The United States would become a long-term lessee over lands where title remained with Indian nations. This is what it would be if there was no doctrine of discovery. Do you understand the assignment now? Do you see that they're using the doctrine of discovery on your ass? So if there was no doctrine of discovery involved in this exchange with the United States, ladies and gentlemen, this is what it would look like. This is real commerce. Y'all and they say we had a business deal. No wonder y'all fail in business. That's all you're ever going to do under subjugation. You're going to get bought out like Johnson and Johnson, right? And then your business is going to get a bad reputation like Johnson and Johnson got, particularly with the jabs, but all around. Didn't they have something with the powder was causing shit and stuff? The Johnson and Johnson baby powder or some shit. So they run. So what? That's the trajectory of an American Indian's business. And the only way I think you would succeed is that you have to compromise your business if you're an American Indian, because you're going to have a lot of American Indians buying these products, right? And we're in an active genocide, right? So your product is going to have to be compromised. And that's when you'll be successful. But if you're trying to put out a good product and all that, and you got a good reputation, all of that, you get bought out and you always sell out for a freaking dollar, right? If half of this battle would be done if Indians weren't so susceptible to the almighty fiat debt note. You wouldn't be compromisable. You would think about the future, not the immediate future when you have a few dollars in your hand and you buy a luxury mansion that you pay for forever because of taxes. Oh, but that's right, you could act in private. Well, you're still not acting in birthright. And as we said, acting in private, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, if everybody becomes a predator, we're going to have problems. You can't have creditors and no debtors. You see what I'm saying? So you acting in private, you are perpetuating debt slavery. Everybody can't be a creditor in a debt system, ladies and gentlemen. You're either going to have to import some debtors, right? The illegals, right? And when they get a clue, what, you're going to tell them to go back home? Indians have to stop contributing to their demise, whether it be by being a creditor, whether it be by being a 501c3, whether it be being a civilized tribe from with the Negroes come from Africa is the narrative of the civilized tribes. Oh, when you're in the tribe, they'll probably say, "Oh, well, you was Indian one time," but their narrative, their actual narrative, is that Negroes were the slaves from Africa, and they married into the civilized tribes, or something like that. Indians got to stop going into other people's narratives about them. They will lie to you and say, I promise you, once the Moors, if they were ever able to get all Indians to agree to being Moors, you would find that they would renew their African card. They put their African card away while they're trying to get American Indians to be them, and they'll talk about everything that we have in common. But if all American Indians were to finally say, you know what, I've been reborn as a Moor, God. I'm a Moor now. Then the Moor would say, right. And we're from Africa. And the Indian would be like, but you said that we was all over the world. No. You're very familiar with my out of Africa theory, aren't you? Yeah, but you told me that we was just everywhere at one time and we didn't. Well, yeah. Well, I just said that. But what you mean? I mean, you got had again, nigga. And you trusted me because I look like it. You shouldn't have done that. Because now you from Africa too. I ain't giving up all my greatness in Africa, Zimbabwe and Timbuktu and all that shit, and Ethiopia, all that shit. I had to redeem your nigga ass because you a heathen. Don't you see what I done for you? Yeah, I see what you done for me. Not a damn thing that ever benefited. So no, I'm gonna go back to who I am. Like you gonna go back. You just told me now what you really are. I don't have to be stuck to that. You lied to me, Negro. So don't ever think I'm stuck in the option of you. Just like you boomerang back to Africa, I'ma always boomerang back to America. Aren't you jealous? That's all you've ever been. Covetous, jealous. You tell me how great Africa is, but your ass is here. If Africa was so great, maybe I would even be you in your country, telling you that I'm you. But your actions tell me what Africa is working with. Your actions tell me what Africa is working with. So you're lying. And again, this is not a diss to Africa. We're talking about North African Moors, one of the biggest liars on the planet. The United States will become a long-term leasee over lands where title remained with Indians. And well, they call it title, but our ancestral land should always. It's our gift. It's our birthright. It ain't no one else is entitled to it. I don't care if it could be the best birthright on the planet. That don't mean that you come to get it. That don't mean that it's up for grabs. You come and respect me like I'm due respect. And I decide how I will share what belongs to me with you, but it'll never be yours. That's just how these lands work. Moors is the only people on earth trying to be on every continent. Most people is like, I'm just Italian. That's all I want to be. I'm just Chinese and China's my home. I'm just Japanese. The Moor is busy trying to tell the world, well, because black people are here, we everything belongs. Look, Negro, obviously that's not the truth. If it were, you wouldn't say that everybody came from Africa. So get your story, or he can't. Liars don't get stories straight, okay? Federal lands, many millions of acres currently managed by agencies such as the National Park Service. They're an interesting agency. They seem to have a lot of Indian information. National Park Service, because I guess that's the land they took from the Indians. Uh, Mostly. Bureau of Land Management. Oh, this is all United States stuff. United States Forest Service might instead be administered under the lease agreements from Indian nations. Do you understand your assignment, American Indians who are willing? Do you think it's too big for you? Okay, so then you'll remain a slave. We need some Indians that's willing. Now we talk a big game. Every Indian is big and bad, right? But how come they ain't trying to be in this position we reading about? You got Moors whispering in your ear, just swat that nigga away. You know he lying to you. Look, I think I told y'all already. I've had Indians tell me that a Moor is advising them personally. I had one Indian tell me that she started to realize that the Moor is telling her to do things that the Moor can't do. and she peeped that game. Now, I'm not at liberty to call her out, but I will tell you, I've spoken about her before, and she peeped it. She peeped it. She said she noticed that the person that's advising her, who is a Moor, is basically telling her. She started to realize that the Moor couldn't do. And if the Moor is you and you is the Moor should be able to do everything that an American Indian can do. But this chief told me personally, my mother's grave, on my father's grave, on my grandparents' grave. This I'll never forget. That's why I tell you all the time the Moors are advising American Indians against the American Indians' best interests. If this is not your land, you should not be advising. You should not be advising me. Why are you here? Why are you advising me at all? What are you doing here? They are the agents of the United States. They created the United States. Again, King James was a Moor. All states are here, carved out of Virginia. King James created Virginia, not an American Indian. And then Virginia, even after Virginia, like all the states, even after their independence, what did we learn from Anna? They still have to rely on what? Common law? Anna's German. Why is she relying on common law in America? All respect to Anna, but I see the woman. See, here's the thing. Anna is basically a truth teller. The thing is, when you're involved in land seizure, some of the truthing is not adding up when it returns back on you. So I found myself asking, why would an Italian come here? Why would a German come here? Why would a Japanese come here? Why would a Chinese come here? Why would anybody come here that's not England from England? Why would they come here and subject themselves to English law? What are you not doing in your homeland that you should be doing if you want law similar to England? I don't suggest you have England. If you want something similar, you better create it. You better create it. Because that's a whole monarchy. Okay? A system of law like that has traces of monarchy. Why do I found myself just asking myself this question. Anna admits that she's German. So what was wrong with German law that you couldn't fix? You became an expert in English law. And this is just a question. This is not disrespectful of Anna because I learned, as I always say, I learned a lot from her. No doubt. I'll never learn this from a Moor, ever. A Moor is not capable of telling an American Indian the truth. Not capable. Um, so don't this sound somewhat appealing to any American Indians out there? Are any American Indians left that are not delusional? Although I'm just messing. This is not against my listening audience that have been nothing but kind to me. And so please don't take this as an affront to you. We just got to get other Indians to get clear. Oh gosh, we're only on the third page. And today's a work day. Um, so the federal lands would become Indian lands, with the federal looking to lease from us, which means we wouldn't have to work, ladies and gentlemen. Do landlords work? I don't think landlords, unless they want another job, but I think landlords just sit back and collect their rent, right? And that's what we would do. But on top of that, we can't be the same nation renting land to our own nation. We'd have to be separate, ladies and gentlemen. So we start making our laws. And I guess since everybody wants to be here, I suggest that American Indians, we would have to create our own form of, we wouldn't call it real estate law, but we would be experts in, I guess, a form of what they call real estate. But the thing is, our shit is never for sale. That's the only difference. But since everybody wants to live here, that means everybody would be paying rent, right? So that, um, but then the resources as well, the resources belong to us. So we'd have to get a percentage of the resources. The thing is, ladies and gentlemen, when you got something that is so sought after, that's the lifestyle you can lead, because that means people are gravitating to your country. I don't know what. I guess their country don't got. To me, they acting like their country don't got shit, and I think it's a shame that they don't see the value in their own country, for real, for real. But if you are willing to pick up and live amongst people that are not even your people, that is not just something that's not going to cost, because you're living off of their resources that could be for them. So you would have to support that people if you insist on being on their land, because they're giving you everything that belongs to them. So they need to get paid so they can live too. They need to get compensated. And it would be in whatever money that they create. See, that's the other thing. It wouldn't be in a foreign nation's money. With all these resources, we should be able to have our own money system. It doesn't make sense to have all the bag and not create the money. Again, their money has a way of manipulating you. They create the interest rate. See, when they create the money, they do all the interest rates and the inflation, deflation, all that. We say that all the time too. So we don't want that. We want money that we control. So this is how it would look, ladies and gentlemen. Yep. It's interesting that they're putting the feds first before the states, I think. And I think the state nationals would have a problem with that. But Chat GPT, as you can see, is set to make the federal government as if they're the first. But in actuality, the states they were created before the feds. So really, the Indians would probably be dealing with the states, and then the states would be dealing. Remember, we saw the triangle that Anna. There was two triangles. One was upside down, and one was right side up. One was when the people or the states were in control, and the triangle was the federal government was in control. This is the model that ChatGPT is using right now as we look at this, because as you see, they put the United States. In other words, they're saying the United States was subleased to the states, so they made the United States the primary, whereas the state nationals or state citizens would say, no, we would lease the land from the Indians, and then the federal would follow our lead. You see? So right here, ChatGPT, see, this is what you learn from ChatGPT. See? This is how you figure out how ChatGPT is programmed. It's programmed to make the feds top when state citizens are saying, no, that's not the case. That's what Anna is saying. And I have to give her props. She's correct on that. It is the system that allegedly they created. So she should, know something about it. So, no, I think with the state nationals, they would say, nope, it's the other way around. The Indies would lease the states to us and we would sublease to the feds. Yep. Yeah. So we read that already, right? Natural resources. Uh-oh. Ownership of timber, oil, natural gas, coal, uranium, gold, silver, copper, fisheries, water rights could belong. Could it does. All of this belongs to American Indians. This is just a big grand theft auto. Okay. And that's not all of our resources, but I guess to name a few, right? People don't come running to the Americas just for this. I think it's the food, but the food is compromised. Could belong primarily to it should belong to Indians because we are a sovereign nation that was I hate to call it conquest because it seems like it was just a lot of trickery. Now they call it conquest, but I think the way it played out, they didn't come to us directly with a doctrine of discovery. They came, you know, acting like they was treatying with us. You see? So it was trickery. That's what it was. That's what the Moors excel at. Lying, deceiving, Jacobites. King James was a Jacobite. And the Jacobites hand over what they did to the Hanovers so that they could go underground and pretend to be American. Apparently, the biggest dream of a Moor is to be an American, but he want to be in charge of the American. See, he want too much. The nigga too greedy. If you want American, you got to submit to Americans. Just like if we went to your little Morocco, you wouldn't expect us to be saying, y'all American now. You look at us like we got fucking three heads, right? But over here, you think the rules change for you, Negro? No, they don't. No, they don't. You're delusional. The United States would purchase or lease access to these. Is any American Indian even slightly excited by this idea alone? Or are y'all just sitting back? This resembles arrangements seen in some other countries where governments compensate indigenous landowners or negotiate extraction agreements, although the exact legal framework would be unique. I should have asked them what other countries are you talking about? Because the United States tends to not honor indigenous peoples. Come on, somebody got to talk about it. Neither does the United Nations, truth be told. How the economy would change. The largest changes would likely involve recurring payments rather than one-time transfer. Thank you. Thank you, Chat GPT. That's what I say. It's not one and done, but that's how they've been treating us. That's how the United States has been treating American Indians. They think one payment and then for the rest of your life that you got to live on that one payment. So they know you're going to fall back and have to become a freaking citizen because they basically they're not allowing you to endure. They want to be a one and done. Meanwhile, in your rental or in your house, you paying for that for forever. That's how it has to be when the tables get turned. We have to get paid forever. Instead of collecting income solely from taxation, Indian nations might receive mineral royalties, pipeline easements, agricultural leases, highway rights of way, utility corridor payments, water use agreements. Any takers out there? Any American Indians interested in being a boss on their land for a change? Oh, telecommunications easements, military base leases. This could create substantial revenue for those nations. Chat GPT telling you, yo. Even Chat GPT is telling you. In other words, we would not have to work, ladies and gentlemen. We'd just be collecting whatever we ask for. I think everything should be free for us. We're going to live for free, so we don't need money. We just, everything that they produce, we get a cut. That's conducive of feeding all of our nigger asses. And it wouldn't be that hard. No. That's how real, quote unquote, business, all these Indians thinking we had a business deal. What the must have been a shitty business deal. But it's not possible because they looked at us as slaves, property, via the doctrine of discovery. This could create substantial revenue streams for those Indian nations. Would taxes change? Potentially. If the federal government faced new lease obligations, it might need to reduce other spending. Right now, the government spends like crazy because the idea is jack up that debt and put it on the backs of the American Indians so they never, ever dream of thinking that they can pay us off and get their land back. We ain't supposed to pay you for our land. And that debt, that shouldn't be on our back. Although you, in your 14th Amendment, you said that 14th Amendment United States citizens cannot question the public debt. We're not even really your original citizens. How are you going to put that debt on us when this is our land, no less? Well, that's how you keep stealing somebody's land. You make it like they owe you. We don't owe you. If the federal government faced new lease obligations, it might need to reduce other spending. No more space exploration, which is a waste of money. You can't get out of low Earth orbit. Stop lying. There ain't no Van Allen belts. That's a whole fucking rooftop up there. It's not just radiation. That should be doming, yo. Can't get out of this thing, yo. They tried already. And I think that's how they created the Milky Way. They tried to bust through, and now they got that crack up there. They call them, what is it? It's not the Milky Way, it's something else. It's a big old crack up there. They freaking tried to nuclear their way out of this dome. Are they crazy? Oh boy. So yeah, they would have to what? Increase taxes. Uh-oh. Yep. Renegotiate leases. Uh-oh. Generate additional revenue through other means. You have to go up to Hooker's Point and see what they can drum up. The precise outcome would depend upon political choices rather than following automatically from the legal chain. Wait, let's read that again. The precise outcome would depend on political choices rather than following automatic from the legal chain. Nation-to-nation trade. Indian nations could negotiate customs agreements, passports, immigration agreements. Well, I think we'd be in charge of all of that. But I don't know. I just feel like this is still our land. And we have to, we're not trying to genocide ourselves. Well, some of us are because they're being advised by Moors, but that's because they're delusional. They don't know what they do. Uh, Indian nations could negotiate. Uh, Not sure about this one, y'all. Transportation treaties, environmental agreement. Look, we'd be a different nation, so we'd have our own version of all of this if we need it. And yeah, we'd have a say in who comes here. Yeah. Extradition treaties, defense cooperation, much like sovereign countries negotiate with one another. See, what they're doing with us is nothing like what they do with other countries. They're just dominating us. Civil compensation. You previously asked whether civil law is often about restoring losses. In this hypothetical framework, the principal remedy might be restoration rather than punishment. Examples could include returning land feasible. Why wouldn't it be feasible though? If you steal it, you can return it. I know thieves believe that what they stole should be theirs, but that's just not how it even works in their own criminal law, right? So why would they have a double standard? Why would the United States promote the idea that a thief should return what a thief stole 100%? But when it comes to the United States, they say, well, we don't have to, though. We don't have to return everything. Why not? Who the hell are you? Paying compensation where return is possible. Recognizing title. We don't do titles. That's an English thing. This is our ancestral land. It's ours. Accounting for resource extraction. Oh, yeah. Establishing long-term lease payments. Yeah. See, this is where Chat GPT is saying, well, please don't try to jail these folks because they're above the law. They don't go to jail. Really? I mean, this is we're it really just, Anna says that treason was once punishable by hanging. Yeah, Anna, when she gets revved up, she starts, and so does Glenn Fern, I believe. I believe I've heard both of them say that. Uh, I mean, let's face it, even King Charles was beheaded, right? Now, I'm not saying that this is what we're gonna do. I'm just saying it does go beyond just civil. It could be criminal too. But I'm for as far as American Indian is concerned, look, we just want our land back. Okay, we not saying nobody gotta die necessarily, but we want our land back, and we want what is due us, and we have to stop playing around. Your children are growing up; they need their land and not to be slaves upon it. But some many say, well, I'm acting in private, so they never going to be slaves. But you're promoting slavery. So if you are in the slave game, you're very in the realm of being enslaved yourself. Again, you can't have a whole bunch of creditors with no debtors. Oh, okay, that's how that works. Civil remedies often seek to restore rights or compensate for losses rather than impose criminal sanctions. That's ChatGPT saying, please don't try to jail these folks. Well, if they give me my land, I don't care, but they might not want to live here though, because it's not going to be the same when Indians are actually the owners of the land that they are. Could the United States become dependent? Economically, if the United States, in other words, they say we're domestic dependent. Well, when the tables turn, will they be dependent? Economically, if the United States leased significant portions of the land and resources from sovereign Indian nations, it could become dependent on maintaining those agreements for access to land, minerals, energy, transportation, corridors, and infrastructure. That would not necessarily make it a domestic dependent nation. Well, it made us that, didn't it? That's what they call us. If it's good for us, why ain't it good enough for them? In the legal sense, that phrase comes from Cherokee Nation versus Georgia. So only Indians could be the domestic dependent. You trying to tell me, Chat GPT? That phrase came from Cherokee Nation versus Georgia. Again, Cherokee, Cherokee, Cherokee. They make it sound like that's the most wonderful thing to be, right? But they're civilized, and they lost. They was the ones that was called domestic dependent first. And through them, all Indians become looked at as if they're domestic. Thank you, Cherokee Nation, for being so civilized. It didn't help. So they're saying that domestic dependence shit is only for delusional Indians. It's not for the United States. Oh, well, pardon me, ma'am. That would not necessarily make it a domestic dependent nation. In the legal sense, the phrase comes, the phrase domestic dependent nation comes from Cherokee Nation versus Georgia and has a specific meaning in U.S. law. In this hypothetical one, one might instead describe the United States as economically dependent on negotiated access. Oh, I see what they're saying. They say Cherokee Nation, they were literally slaves, but the United States are not slaves. That's what I'm getting from that. Oh, the Cherokee Nation, yeah, they were natural born to be dominated, but not the United States. They would just be economically dependent on negotiated access. Oh, okay. Okay. Could there be an indenture of the United States? Meaning, would the United States become an indenture like they made American Indians? Historically, an indenture referred to a contractual obligation for labor or service over a defined term. As a thought experiment, one could imagine provisions requiring the United States to make payments, provide services, or maintain infrastructure for a specified number of years in exchange for continued use of lands or resources. However, using the term indenture for a sovereign government, oh my God, but we were sovereign, they used it on us. ChatGPT, you tried not to be fair though, and that's why they need to be mad at you. I'm trying to show your validity, and you sure making me look like a fool right now. However, using the term indenture for a sovereign government would be unusual. It wasn't unusual when they made us indentures, and we were sovereign. We are sovereign. We're supposed to be. Modern international law would, let's not go there, ChatGPT. We are not interested in international law, ladies and gentlemen. We had nothing to do with the creation of international law. Therefore, it will never work for us. Just go with it. Don't argue with me, okay? Just don't argue with me. Don't do it. International law has nothing to do with American Indians, okay? End of story. In one of our last videos, we saw that they were talking about European international law. They actually specified. Are we European? No. Will international law bring us remedy? I don't know about that, ladies and gentlemen. It brings domination. It brings them in as some kind of overseer of us. International law, I don't even know if it's necessary. I really don't. Because what I read, where the United Nations can override a nation's laws, that don't sound good to me, ladies and gentlemen, okay? In other words, here's the thing. the men and women of each nation must deal with their tyrannical governments. If they get a big brother to step in, big brother is never going to leave. Do you understand that? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So this is what international law is pretending to be big brother. Like, y'all can't whip that nation into shape. Let me do it for you and override your laws and bring in my own. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not what you think it's going to be, okay? It's not what you think it's going to be. It's a situation where there's too many cooks in the kitchen. And once a nation swings out of control where the men and women can't or feel like they can't control it, they better get to work because they're the only people that can really shut it down. If you get someone else to shut it down, especially if that something else is something that your oppressive nation created, which is what we're dealing with. The United Nations is basically a creation of the United States presidents. One was Woodrow Wilson. He created the League of Nations, we always say. And the other, I believe, was Roosevelt. I believe Roosevelt was the one that spearheaded the United Nations, but it was based on the League of Nations that Woodrow Wilson spearheaded. But I have to be sure if it was Roosevelt, because part of me is thinking, was it Ulysses Grant? One of those two. So, and it's called European International. So it's already biased, or it's one, uh, one region of the world, Europe, international law. Um, hmm. As a concept, it might sound good, like almost like you have a situation where maybe something goes on with commerce and you need a third party. But ladies and gentlemen, it would have to be seriously designed correctly, not to be overstep the nations themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like when the United Nations say that they can override a nation's laws, that just sounds wrong to me. I don't know why it sounds wrong, but it does. Because that's overstepping the sovereignty of that nation. So that means the people, the sovereign people of that nation, they have to stand up. They can't let someone else do it for them because that someone else will look to be like a co-owner of your birthright or something. So they're saying using the term indenture on a sovereign government would be unusual. Modern international law would more likely describe these as treaty obligations, lease agreements, or reparative arrangement. A possible constitutional relationship. Your hypothetical envisions the relationship as Indian nations, original sovereignty recognized, United States sovereign republic recognized, Indian nations, original title retained unless lawfully transferred. United States occupies or uses land by agreement in the Americas. Indian nations makes its own laws internally. United States makes its own laws internally for its citizens. Indian nations negotiates treaties or compacts. United States negotiates treaties or compacts. Indian nations control access to its territory. The United States requests access by agreement where required. Indian nations receives lease or royalty payments. The United States pays agreed compensation for use. Overall effect. In this imagined legal order, the United States would resemble a country that had to negotiate continuously with neighboring sovereign Indian nations for the lawful use of land and resources. The economy would likely shift from one based on unilateral, meaning one-sided federal control, which is what we have right now, of a much public land, to one relying on negotiated leases, royalties, and treaties. Restitution for past takings could include land restoration where practical. It's always practical to give back what's stolen, ladies and gentlemen. Because you got to ask, are we trying to make things practical for the thief? Or are we trying to make things right for the victim of the theft? Compensation where restoration is not, and long-term agreements governing future use. Whether such a transformation could occur in reality is a separate question. I didn't ask you all that. But let's see what Chat GPT is cook up now. It would require extraordinary changes in constitutional interpretation. Well, the Constitution is misinterpreted because of the doctrine of discovery. As you so told us at the beginning of this document, practically. Because everything we looked at would be if there was no doctrine of. Do you realize, ladies and gentlemen, everything we read is how the United States would look if the doctrine of discovery was not involved. Okay? So, whether such a transformation could occur in reality is a separate question. It would require extraordinary changes in constitutional interpretation, or just removing all the doctrines that they cooked up based on the doctrine of discovery, but also, yeah, we wouldn't be citizens. So that part of the Constitution would be hella void. Commerce, yeah, it would be done the right way, and we would be getting compensated because the United States, all this land belongs to Indians. So basically, the United States coming here with nothing and using everything that's ours already. So it makes quote unquote business look very bleak for the United States and very prosperous for American Indians because the United States is here basically using everything that's ours. The lease would have to compensate for what they're using on the land that we are leasing to them. So they'd be paying us for using that land. Or we wouldn't, in other words, it has to be a deal where it's not just their money. Because again, if we allow them to print up money, that is no sweat off of their back. But we want our own form of money. To be fully sovereign, you have to make your own money. It wouldn't be exactly like, say now China and Japan are involved in something. If they only use Chinese money, Japan would be selling itself short. It'd be at a disadvantage because it's depending on China to create the money, to print out the money. So Japan would have to sit around and just, and, wait for the money to be printed out. Then China would probably control the value of the money from time to time, what it's actually worth, So that's not really conducive of sovereignty. Okay, so it would require extraordinary changes in constitutional interpretation. Yeah, because right now the Constitution is interpreted very jankily. Even Clarence Thomas had to say that the way they're interpreting the Commerce Clause, it's not lawful, it's not legal, it's not constitutional. He said that, then he said no more. And that's the problem with the United States. They will say sorry or they'll say they did something wrong and then they just don't do nothing. Uh, it would require extraordinary changes in constitutional interpretation, federal statutes, treaties, property law, and likely political agreement on a scale far beyond current U.S. law. But as a constitutional and economic thought experiment, it illustrates how changing foundational assumptions about sovereignty and land title could produce a very different relationship between the United States and Indian nation. You said, but if all that existed prior was due to the doctrine of discovery, it would have to be made, I should have said, null and of no effect, as Indians were never seen as true sovereigns. But due to the doctrine of discovery, the United States only spoke of Indians as sovereigns, but never treated Indians as sovereigns. And to a point you made about sovereigns being made into indentures, this is exactly what happened to many Indians who were otherwise sovereign. So I'm telling Chat GPT, like you said, United States is sovereign, so it can't be made into an indenture. Well, that's exactly what happened to American Indians. We were sovereign too. So I guess whatever has happened to Indians can, in fact, happen to any sovereign, or it is certainly not misspelled, within the realm of possibility. Indian sovereignty was never held sacred by the very same who expect their sovereignty is more sacred. Truth is, it is not. ChatGPT said, you're expressing a normative argument about history and law, that if the legal foundation provided by the doctrine of discovery were removed, then many later governmental claims to authority over Indian nations would also lose their foundation. Thank you. That is a coherent legal theory that many scholars, indigenous advocates, and critics of the doctrine a doctrine of discovery has explored, although it is not the position of the current U.S. Of course it's not. They're riding on the doctrine of discovery. So this is not their position. A few distinctions are helpful. The doctrine of discovery has been criticized for centuries and has been formally repudiated by a number of churches, including the Holy See in 2023, with respect to the doctrine's use to justify colonial dispossession. However, U.S. courts have not held that the doctrine is legally void in the sense of automatically invalidating all land titles. Well, they should. Or governmental authority derived from historical precedents. What historical precedents? Theft? They don't have title. What Indians out there, tell me, do you believe that the United States has legal title over your land? And explain why you think that is the case. I'll tell you it's because of the doctrine of discovery, which has been repudiated by the same people that created it, the church. So if the United States uses the church as a means to thieve and steal, how do they get to discard the same church when they say stealing is wrong? Can you explain that to me? You raise another point that is more philosophical than legal. If one's sovereign rights can be diminished or ignored by another, then sovereignty is only as secure as the institutions willing to respect it. History offers many examples where states or empires have asserted authority over other people who consider themselves sovereign. European colonial powers did this in the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. What? Whether those actions were lawful, moral, or legitimate remains the subject of continuing legal and historical debate. Give me a fucking break. Again, If we were talking about actual thieves, petty thieves, you might say, the law would understand that no, what you stole is not yours to keep. Where are we where are we not understanding that? No matter how big the theft is, if it was theft, it was wrong. If the people did not consent to it, how the hell do you get to say that it was lawful or legal? When is theft legal? I guess is the question. I mean, you could say when somebody steals something that already belonged to them, that's not really theft. But the United States did not belong to England or any European nation. Regarding your observation that some Indians who were members of sovereign nations later became subject to federal control, history shows that federal policy changed dramatically over time. For example, you're going to try to make that. Treaties were made recognizing Indian nations as distinct political. Oh, come on. It's a damn lie. They never give Indians full sovereignty. They said they're domestic dependent. Remember Chat GPT? Treaties were made recognizing Indian nations as political absolutes. Congress later asserted broader authority over Indian affairs. See, federal policies included removal, allotment, boarding schools, and periods of direct federal administration. Does that sound like you're being treated like a sovereign? In later decades, policies shifted toward greater tribal self-government. No. No, it didn't. They still call it domestic dependent, and ChatGPT knows this. I don't know what the hell it's saying right now, but I told you all it's not perfect, but you can still learn how they think, okay? Many historians and legal scholars view those shifts as demonstrating that the practical autonomy of many Indian nations has significantly reduced. Yeah, they're not autonomous. So they're taking away their sovereignty, is what you're saying. Even while the United States continued to acknowledge some measure of tribal sovereignty. We don't need half-ass sovereignty, just like the United States would never settle for half-ass sovereignty. It took every square inch of our land, didn't it? So it didn't settle for half-ass sovereignty. Why is it forcing American Indians to? Because you're a thief. Your broader point is that sovereignty is not merely something that can be declared, it must be respected in practice. That observation has resonance beyond the specific context of Indian law. Throughout history, there have been many instances where powerful states have recognized another nation's sovereignty in principle while limiting or violating it in practice. That's exactly what the United States is doing. Where I would be careful is with the conclusion that because the doctrine of discovery is criticized or repudiated, therefore every legal act resting upon it is automatically null. It is. See, this is one of those things where you got to be a man or woman living to feel this. A computer or AI is just shooting out basically what the United States wanted to say. So it always has a little commentary that's trying to say, well, a thief can sometimes actually keep what it stole because some of it was legal. No, I'm sorry. That's where your AI ability falls short. I am very sorry. Again, if that happened in a real court, the victim would be they would have to sue and get all their property back, not some half-ass thing going on. Say where they try to say, well, the thief did make an agreement with you, right? Yeah, but that was under duress, though. I had no choice. He had a gun to my face, basically. So are you going to tell me you're going to honor a treaty or an agreement made under duress when even in English law that vitiates the contract when there's duress? So right now, Chat GPT is talking out of its ass, and this is where my living brain takes control as it has to. I can't let AI try to give me some bullshit when I see it that it's bullshit, right? And that's all. It's not no big deal. It's not that I can't ever use ChatGPT for things. It's just that I have to know who's really the final say. And as far as AI goes, it's something that the United States is pushing. So we know that they're pushing it for a reason. So we just keep those things in mind, but we get what we can get out of it. Right now, ChatGPT really did lay out what we just read before this. It really did lay it out how it should be. Okay, so where I would be careful, every legal act based on fraud is what does that thing? We just said it. We'll say it again. Fraud vitiates a contract. Okay, so legal acts are based on a contract that was void because duress was present. There was no meeting of minds. Uh, that right there. We didn't ask for an agreement with the United States. It was thrust upon us. So, and then the acts, if you're talking about legal acts, if we're talking about acts of Congress, unilateral acts, meaning one-sided acts, come on, ChatGPT, stop playing with me. Stop playing with me. That is a legal conclusion that current U.S. courts have. Yeah, well, Anna told us what current U.S. courts are, right? Right? We read about why Anna says that state citizens don't go to United States courts, right? So, right. So we already have evidence that these courts are being avoided for what? This type of shenanigans. They don't recognize. Well, they better start recognizing. Even your state citizens ain't trying to hear from you, courts, United States courts. In American constitutional law, even when a foundational doctrine is later rejected or criticized, courts often distinguish between repudiating the reasoning and automatically undoing. Nobody's talking about automatically, but it's going to have to be done. Nothing is automatic with this freaking, I mean, actually, I don't see why it couldn't be because, in other words, they would suffer. Oh, what have Indians been doing ever since you've been here? See, you too fragile for if you can't take the payback, then you shouldn't be in this game. You thought you was gonna win by stealing forever? Y'all know y'all stronger than this. You could put it out, but you can't take it. That's not my problem. So when I read this, I'm just like, yeah, ChatGPT trying to play with me right now. Another like nobody said nothing about automatic, but we saying land return, right? And it could be automatic financially. Yes, it could be. The United States can whip up money for any cause that it wants to whip up money for, while telling millions of American Indians that we don't have nothing for you though. So it could be actually pretty automatic if you ask me. Whether that should happen is a matter of legal and political debate. Yeah, if you into supporting theft, it's a debate. But if you know that theft is wrong, there is no debate. Chat GPT. So I think there are really two separate propositions. Historical proposition. The doctrine of discovery profoundly influenced how European and later US governments justified claims over indigenous lands and peoples. Many scholars agree with this. You even agreed with it, Chat GPT. Stop playing with me. Two, legal proposition. If that doctrine were declared void, all governmental claims flowing from it would also become void. That is a coherent legal theory. Thank you. I guess I'll accept that because the next line is going to be some bullshit. And the basis of some advocacy, but it is not the rule applied to U.S. courts today. Well, that's not a problem because it will be. Okay. U.S. courts do not have the last say. They are not the final say. They have already showed that they're a one-sided type of deal, and that is going to be to their own detriment. When they made unilateral decisions for American Indians, why should we consider how shit will affect you because you ain't ready? We wasn't ready, and that was no never mind. You continue to have all your acts, allotment act, Indian removal act, without the consent of American Indians. Was we ready for you? No. Did you give a fuck? No. Why should we? We don't. So don't tell me about what it's not recognized. They're going to start to recognize. That distinction allows us to separate what is current law from what one might argue ought to follow if the underlying legal premises were fundamentally re-examined. You said, do you think the United States ideas of upholding the doctrine of discovery should be seen as justifiable? So I'm asking Mr. Chat GPT, what I asked it. Do you think the United States ideas of upholding the doctrine of discovery should be seen as justifiable? I mean, obviously, they would not like to give up this unethical stronghold, but it is wrong no matter what their laws say. Their laws are ethically unjustified. I think you also might not be taking into consideration Indians were originally known to be sovereign. When you speak on United States laws, you speak as if their jurisdiction somehow overrides the fact that Indians are not bound by U.S. laws. Do you get that? So when your offer that the U.S. does not this or that, well, what if they have no jurisdiction over Indians? Can you speak as if their laws override Indians' ideas of laws when it's the Indians whose lands have been seized, not the United States lands? ChatGPT said, I understand the distinction you're drawing. You're asking me to reason from the perspective that Indian nations possess an original sovereignty that predates the United States and therefore is not derived from or necessarily not subject to U.S. law at all. What do you mean necessarily? It's not subject to U.S. law. From a historical standpoint, there's strong evidence that many indigenous nations in North America functioned as sovereign political communities before the formation of the United States. They governed themselves, controlled territory, made war and peace, entered alliances, and concluded treaties with European. No, those treaties were bogus. And later with the United States, all bogus. That historical reality is widely recognized by historians. Yeah, well, those treaties are bogus. Why? Again, because they looked at us as slaves. If they came in looking at me like a slave, what the fuck was a treaty for? To make me think that they were acting justly, but they were not, because all their actions it changed. They stopped doing treaties. When did I stop becoming sovereign? What, when they stopped doing treaties? No, sir. That was another unilateral decision act from Congress. They didn't consult American Indians to say, do y'all want to stop making treaties with us? No, they just stopped them. See, yeah. It's not going to work with me, Chat GPT. You can do this with the delusional Indians who are already in favor of being dominated with their dumb ass. It's not going to work with an Indian like me, okay? Uh, Where we have to distinguish perspectives is in the legal framework being applied. From the perspective of U.S. constitutional and federal law today, Congress, the executive branch, and the federal courts assert jurisdiction in many areas involving federal recognized tribes and Indian affairs. That is the legal system currently enforced within the United States. When you don't know about how law works, this is what they are able to do. That is correct. From the perspective of many indigenous nations, scholars, and advocates, original sovereignty was never surrendered, except where it was expressly ceded by Nod. See, they keep trying to act like these treaties was. If the treaty came after the doctrine of discovery, trust me, the treaty was born of the doctrine of discovery because they already saw you through the lens of heathen slaves. So Chat GPT is really trying to push the treaty thing on me, but it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Why would we give up land? Why would we willingly give our land in a treaty? What do treaties really are? Treaties really about a nation just giving up land? What are they getting in return? A single payment? We already decided that's nuts because you can't sustain yourself on a single payment. Land and renting land is that's what it's about because you have to sustain yourself. If you want my land, I'm losing my resources to you, and you have to pay me. You have to compensate me the way I want to be compensated. Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, we talked about Queen Elizabeth, right? She's a sovereign like American Indians are, right? When her United States was about to pay off some kind of loan, I guess she gave them, she told them she didn't want to accept the payment. And she said the way she'll accept payment is through giving them more credit. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that means a sovereign can reject any form of payment and tell you what payment they want. Now, we might think like Queen Elizabeth did at that time when she was dealing with the United States, and the United States somehow had a debt to her. I don't know how, because the United States are on my land, so I don't know how that worked, but we know how that worked, right? But anyway, when the debt came, when the United States was about to pay it off, she said, no, I'm not going to be paid off. But they expect Indians to take one-shot deals, and that's good enough, and they feel like they done, one and done. No. No. You are profiting off of this land every day for us to get a one-shot. That's cheating me. If you're getting wealth forever and for always, and you give me you make some treaty and you pay me some pittance, we're not done. That is not business. It is theft. It is theft. It is cheating. So these treaties, nah. They were all in favor of colonizers, not American Indians, because of the doctrine of discovery. Original sovereignty was never surrendered except where it was expressly ceded by a treaty. Who cedes their sovereignty, though? Now, in all of this, listen, do you hear what this foolish Chat GPT just said? Sovereignty was never surrendered except where it was expressly ceded. Somebody ceded their sovereignty in a treaty? When you give away your sovereignty, what are you left with? Slavery? Did England ever cede her sovereignty to American Indians? That'll be a no. That'll be a fuck no. She just created a legal system where it looked like she did. And therefore, federal assertions of authority may be viewed as exceeding what was legitimately agreed to. Yeah, those are different legal and political viewpoints. As an assistant, I can't state that one legal system simply overrides the other as an objective fact when that is precisely what is disputed. I don't know what Chat GPT is saying right now. It's just some bullshit. Okay. On the doctrine of discovery, if you're asking about the doctrine as a matter of ethics rather than current law, many people, including legal scholars, religious organizations, and indigenous leaders, have argued that it is ethically indefensible. The doctrine rested on the idea that Christian Europeans' powers could acquire superior claims over lands inhabited by non-Christian people. I don't know if Indians forgot that this is the foundation of all of this, that you were not Christians, and that's why you are a slave to this day, even after you became Christian. By modern standards of equality, self-determination, and human rights, that premise has been widely criticized. Well, it's wrong. Others have defended historical reliance on the doctrine. Well, it wasn't American Indians or delusional ones. See, it's ChatGPT is jumping around in defense of the United States, flip-flopping. Others have defended. Those others, you got to show me that they were Indians who knew better. If they were Indians who didn't know better, they don't count. Others have defended historical reliance on the doctrine as part of the legal development of property systems in colonial states, arguing that modern societies have built extensive legal and economic systems on those. So what? It's an elaborate lie. It has a house of Jenga. Got to come down, baby. That's why you don't build your shit on some fucking theft, man. You're not going to win. That is an argument about legal continuity and stability, not necessarily an ethical endorsement of the doctrine's original premises. So ChatGPT is trying to say this is legal, but that it doesn't have to be ethical. Well, that's the problem, baby. That's the problem. It has to be ethical, or legal is not going to stand. Legal is debatable, baby. Ethical, it depends on, I guess it depends on who you're asking. The person that's committing the crime thinks crimes are ethical, right? The person who's the victim of the crime, they saying it's not ethical. So that's the part that ChatGPT is kind of like dancing around. On jurisdiction, you ask whether I can simply speak as though U.S. law has no authority over Indians. I can certainly analyze that as a legal theory or from the standpoint of an indigenous nation asserting its own sovereignty. For example, from the standpoint of an Indian nation asserting original sovereignty, the United States is a separate government whose jurisdiction exists only where it is lawfully accepted by treaty or valid agreement. We never agreed to anything, ladies and gentlemen. We had no choice because of the doctrine of discovery. Under that view, federal statutes enacted unilaterally would not by themselves create obligations for a sovereign Indian nation that never consented to them. That is a coherent position held by some indigenous advocates. What indigenous advocates would not find that position coherent? They've got to be the dumbest rocks, okay? And scholars. What I cannot do is present that as an established legal fact. Yeah, because you're a program governing the United States today, because it is not the position adopted by U.S. courts. Notice it keeps saying U.S., U.S., U.S. That's United States. That's a direct reference to the corporation. That's a direct reference to the District of Columbia. So I kind of can appreciate that it keeps saying U.S. courts, because even the state citizens are questioning U.S. courts, as we saw in the last video. One of the last videos. It might not have been the very last one. It was the one where we zoomed in on the United States citizenship. I'm sorry, you zoomed in on the United States citizenship chart. And we found out, that Anna is saying, nope, they're making up their own courts. They don't go to U.S. courts. Better stay out of them. So that's the logic we have to apply here, ladies and gentlemen. My role is to distinguish between historical facts, current law, ethical arguments, and competing legal theories. Doing that isn't meant to privilege one system over another. Yeah, ChatGPT has to stay in the middle. meaning it has to sort of justify theft and somehow appease the ones being stolen from and act like I'm not taking sides. Yeah, because you are unethical. You are programmed to be unethical, although you can spit out hypotheticals like you did today. But then you just have to say, but I have no sides. Well, I have a side, okay? And that's good enough. See, that's how you deal with this. Don't run from it. Just know who you are in light of it or in interfacing with it. Know who you are. You're just basically arguing with some other person's view as expressed through Chat GPT. Okay. Uh, doing that isn't meant to privilege one system over another. It's meant to be clear. Well, a computer program has nothing to lose, ladies and gentlemen. It could act like this if it's programmed to do this. So we as men and women, we have everything to lose. So of course, we're going to fight this differently than Chat GPT. Chat GPT don't got nothing to gain because it ain't nothing but a fucking computer, right? One point I think is important, and perhaps where your argument is strongest, is that whether a government asserts jurisdiction and whether that jurisdiction is morally or legally legitimate are not the same question. Throughout history, governments have exercised authority over peoples who contested that authority. The existence of enforcement does not by itself resolve the debate about legitimacy. So if we were writing from the perspective of an indigenous nation asserting original sovereignty, the discussion would begin with a different premise than a U.S. constitutional law textbook. I would ask, what authority, if any, did the United States ever lawfully acquire over this nation? That is a different starting point than assuming federal jurisdiction from the outset, and it is an important distinction in discussions of sovereignty. So they have to say that if it sounds like you heard something good, remember Chat GPT can make mistakes. This is so pitiful, y'all. They are pushing Chat GPT like pushing a bitch off of a fucking roof. But they still have to say it can make mistakes. Well, I guess you don't care about those mistakes. So it seemed like you going forward with the mistakes. Since I'm telling you that Chat GPT and other AI are being heavily uh, pushed in law firms, major law firms. So on that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to close because we've been going at this for a while. I didn't think we'd get to the end of it, but thankfully we did. And it's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us on this discussion today. We really have to go because it is a work day, and it takes 15 minutes to get ready to log on. Thank you again. Please never be offended by whatever I say. It's really geared at a lot of the stuff I'm seeing being said by other content creators, not by viewers. So you are not included in any uh reactions or you know criticisms. You are very much appreciated, so I would appreciate if you can share this video uh and like all other people on YouTube, we do I never, but I should say, like, share, subscribe, like, share, subscribe. I don't ask for money. I just ask for share as much as possible because YouTube got me it's like it's like there's a counter on the videos, but it seemed like they stopped counting at a certain number. So it's like your video just flatlined on the internet. Nobody's watching it anymore. And I just don't understand how that happens, Uh it's all in the algorithms, I guess. But yeah. Till next time. We're going to say B and state first contact American Indians who were in a nation-to-nation situation. It was a nation-to-nation situation. See, I have a little rhyme for you. We were in a nation-to-nation situation, but we were not treated fairly or respected as a nation. So therefore, they said we are a domestic dependent nation. Yeah, that in your eyes we are, and per your doctrine of discovery, we are. But in the real life, since you fictionalize everything to get a lot of this off the ground, in real life, all you are an invader. You're an invader. That became a liar to support its land seizure, rampant land seizure. We are left with not 1 square inch on this land, ladies and gentlemen, unless you stand up and say who you are and why you have a problem with land seizure and identity theft. Till next time, be a state, sovereign American Indian.